The M4 or the STB-556 for the ultimate weapon that has everything and fails at mostly nothing. So today we're going to look at the king of the jack of all trades. And like the Highlander,
there can be only one.
I understood that reference.
Now, we're going to be judging these weapons on 3 specific categories. I'm going to go over each and why each is going to work and why each may be failing to the other. But by the end of this video, I'm going to give you undoubtedly the best of the 2 for the jack of all trades. Now, let's go ahead and cover some bases here. I'm not including weapons like the Cast-Off 7.4U or the Chimera, or weapons like the Lachman Sub or the Vesnav. All of them in their respective places are the best at what they do. The Lachman and the Vesnav are both the strongest SMGs for both close range and out to range. The Cast-Off 7.4U and Chimera both cover the sniper support. But the M4 and the SCB both can offer you something the rest of them cannot, which is flexibility. Not only flexibility in the weapon builds themselves, but in the loadouts that you can run them with. The M4 and the SCB both can do sniper support, primary AR, long-range AR, meaning you're no longer running it just as an SMG style, but you can run it as an SMG style, a close-range AR, a mid-to-close-range AR, a mid-range AR, long-range, and also in single shot can be used much like a marksman rifle. Now, with these kinds of weapons, with these kinds of options, you always need to consider them as a possible run for a one-weapon loadout, or if you needed to buy something specifically to cover all your bases early game from one of your buy stations, these would be the weapons I would recommend. And this is why we're doing the breakdown, who will be the king of the jack of all trades. Categories are as follows: build flexibility, the viability over each of its individual ranges, and finally, the utility for each of the different builds that you can build out of them. This all seems like a lot of the similar things, but I promise you it's going to make sense by the time we're done. The first category we're looking at is build flexibility. We're going to go ahead and start in close range builds. These builds are specifically going to be built in the idea of being able to close in on your target, but still having a reliable TTK close to far. And now these builds are both using the fastest movement speed options available for the weapons. We have here the M4 with the Tempest Trench Pro, the FSS OLE5 Laser, and the Tempest P80 Strike, along with the SCB with the 16.5 Bruin, the 7 milliwatt laser, and the Bruin MX9 stock. And we're going to be looking at the 2 options here. The M4 sits at a 202 millisecond ADS speed with the SCB at a 201. So target for the SCB, we have a tactical sprint series of 7.76, 4.8, and 3.5 to the 7.6, 5.9, 4.75, and 3.39. So these are also very, very similar when it comes to all this. The benefit here goes specifically out to the sprint to fire time at 99 milliseconds compared to the M4's 184 milliseconds, and the tactical sprint to fire at 189 compared to the M4's 279. So the M4 runs a little bit faster, but the STB ADS is a little bit faster and has an overall faster sprint to fire time, leaning closer to the STB to be the winner. And of course, once you look at the numbers to the body and to the head as well, it looks like it leans slightly more to the STB for the body and slightly more to the M4 to the head. So when it's going to come down to it, we're going to have to look a little bit further out. The SCB manages to fall off first, and then once later off, it manages to take over the M4. And then we go to headshots, and the SCB manages to fall off, and it still stays to the M4. So for close quarters viability, I'm going to say the point goes to the STB for the standard player, the M4 for the exceptionally good player. So if you are used to landing body shots, go for the SCB. If you're used to landing headshots, lean closer to the M4. The next is the mid-range viability here for build flexibility. We've taken both the mid-range barrel options, the 14-inch carbine Shroud and the 18-inch Bruin Gorilla for the M4, and threw on the high velocity rounds to just look at the options here again. The M4 at 939 meters a second compared to the SCB's 939, so they are even on that. The STB has a slightly faster movement speed. They have the same ADS speed, and the ADS forward goes to the STB. When we look at mid-range options, we see the STB is faster up close, but when we get to the mid-range options, the M4 holds it from 15 to 25 meters, and then the STB from 25 all the way out to tying about 46. So on mid-range builds, you're going to be looking at the winner being the STB. Just for the sheer from base standards, the M4 drops off extremely heavy at 26 meters, going from a 592 all the way down to an 814, which is a significant jump on TTK, meaning the M4 is going to lean a lot closer to close quarters than it is to long range. And the final part of the build flexibility section, we're looking at long range. We're running both the longest barrel for the M4 and the longest non-integral suppressed barrel for the STB, the FTAC FB20 versus the M4's high tower 20-inch barrel. Something that will be interesting to know is the high tower 20-inch barrel's only benefit over the 14-inch carbine is actual bullet velocity, and the only benefit of that over the 11.5 is the bullet velocity and the damage range, meaning the high tower, the 14-inch, and the 11.5 all have the exact same recoil control, which means if you're looking for a faster build, you can use the 14-inch or the 11.5 without sacrificing any recoil control options. Not the same for the STB though. All of its different barrels have different values, so keep that in mind. But looking at the long range, we're going to say anything over probably about 35 meters is going to be considered long range. We're seeing the STB is maintaining that long range supremacy all the way up to 54 meters, in which case at 55, they even out to just about the same, with 10 milliseconds being the difference. Meaning, again, it looks like the STB maintains the #1 slot for long range. If we start looking at headshots, we are going to see a slight difference, whereas the M4 with its higher bullet velocity can continue to win whenever it gets out to the headshot ranges, but over long range, you're not hoping to aim specifically for the head, as any missed shots are going to significantly drop your TTK. Most of the time, you're going to want to hit high chest. That way you can get some good headshots in while getting some good chest shots and good neck shots. So overall, consistency-wise, we're looking at the STB again for build flexibility. That's two categories down, both build flexibility and range viability. Right now, unless you're landing headshots, you need to lean into the STB 5.56. And even with headshots, the M4 isn't significantly more lethal than the STB either, except for in some very niche situations. So now the last question is, how do they stack up for different build styles? Now, so far we've looked at just pure numbers and the way that the weapons will perform if you are 100% accurate. But now we're going to start looking at build viability. And this is where things can be a little bit different. Warzone is a battle of not only numbers, but performance. So one of the things you always need to do upon reaching the idea of builds is also considering how it actually plays in game. Now, different guns have different, pros and cons. And with the SCV versus the M4, obviously that is no different. Learning to understand what makes a build work and what makes a build not work is going to go a long way to help you determine how this is going to feel for you, especially in the field. Because when it comes down to it, if it doesn't feel good to run, then it doesn't matter what its numbers are. Because it could be the best gun in the game, but if it feels poor to actually utilize it, it means it's not the best gun in the game anymore. So the M4 and the STB both feature a lot of variety in builds, which I've already showed you. We have movement builds, we have recoil builds, we have hybrid builds, and then we have unique attachments to deal with as well. The M4 features quite a few unique attachments comparatively to the STB. And so that's kind of what we're going to look at right here. So we're going to drop the laser and we're going to look at a couple of things that the STB doesn't have access to. And that is the Corvus Master Key and the brand new SPW 40mm drill, which is a underbarrel drill charge. Now, I'm going to go ahead and tell you right now, the underbarrel options are usually useless in this game. All of the foregrips right here all deal with recoil stabilization, which doesn't actually help recoil control any. All it does is stabilize the visual recoil that you're dealing with. If visual recoil is too much for you, then obviously these are things you'll start looking at. Things like recoil stabilization. Again, that is primarily around the idea of reducing how much the sights themselves actually wobble. But overall, they don't really do much. So a lot of times you can actually get more utility out of the rear grips and tuning them to recoil steadiness and aiming stability. And what that does is it gives you the exact same amount of recoil control you would expect out of it, without the negative side effects of reducing a lot of your movement speed and of the such. So, but looking here at the drills and the underbarrels and things of that sort, these actually allow for tuning in sprint speed, sprint to fire speed, and aim walking steadiness. And if you've ever been attacked by a very organized group of sweats, you've probably been hit by a drill charge before. And now you have a underbarrel launcher that can carry up to 6 of them, which means if you have a ammo box and drill charges, you can reliably, I don't know, throw 10 of them at one building to clean a complete building out. That's a bit overpowered. And that is something you always need to consider when you go into these weapons, is some of them have more utility than others. So right now we've already determined that the STB wins at close quarters. It actually outclasses the M4 at mid-range, and it outclasses the M4 at long range. If you are a headshot player, you can make the M4 work better at close and at long range, and they tie around in the middle. But when you start considering the fact that you have the ability now to also turn an M4 into a breaching device, which fires very similar to the STB, and it still allows itself to have more utility on top of that, which one starts winning? Well, this is the fun part where it comes into your play style. So play style and who you're playing with is going to directly affect the way that you need to approach these weapons. And though there is going to be an actual winner to all of this, I'm not saying that you can't make the other one work. So what I'm going to recommend is when looking at the utility, consider what can and can't be done by each of the individual weapons. One of the other ones you need to look at is things like the magazine with the single tap mod for the STB. The STB single tap mod increases the damage, bullet velocity, and things of the such. But of course, you only get a 10-round mag. And if you are not good at single shots, then it's probably not going to work out for you. But what it does do is it does allow you to turn the STB into a marksman rifle, which gives you more build viability. Again, running something like the Bruin Tarraco 686 also gives you an integral suppressed STB without having to sacrifice a muzzle attachment, and gives you still some good recoil control, recoil steadiness, and additional ADS speed or damage range. Again, unique items to run. But do the unique items vary enough to make the one weapon defeat the other one in this? I'm going to tell you now, no. Right now, after the adjustments to the STB outclasses the M4 in everything other than an underbarrel launcher. And honestly, if the underbarrel launcher is make or break for you between these two, then you probably haven't considered the combat value of the other weapons around it. The M4 is good for close range, which means you're generally not going to be running it against somebody with an SMG as well, because it's primarily better at close range, close to mid for the M4 over its long range capabilities. And the STB is better than the M4 on almost every front outside of the random headshots that you can get. So with the combination of build viability and the combination of just overall TTK, the winner and our Highlander today is the STB 556. If you're looking for one weapon and only one weapon to run on the Warzone, and you only get that option, grab yourselves an STB 556. You won't regret it. Thank you all so much for checking out this video. If you have more weapons that you would love to see me cover, or more play styles that you would like to see a breakdown of, let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to have you. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone else, peace.